So what a winner's mindset, you need good teachers, Edward, and you mentioned your teacher before we came on here, the fact that I've tutored, and it being the best ones inspire you and the best ones push you on. And we had this fellow called Paul Hart, an ex-professional himself.
Was there a time in your life where you've had to see somebody about your mental health when you're playing football, maybe during obviously that time that you said at Southampton, when you weren't playing as much? How much of an effect?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. If you come away from the actual issue of age, sorry, not the issue, the discussion of age, it's about being able to be relatable. And I think if you are of the mindset that you can put yourself in the shoes of a younger person, but you talk about a younger person.
Welcome to the Winners Mindset podcast. David, how are you?
I'm very well, Edward. How are you? It's great. It's a pleasure to be on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And obviously, when I found about you and I heard about you, you work at Sky Sports, and your footballing career really speaks for itself. Really, you've obviously played at Leeds, played at Southampton, Nottingham Forest, loads of appearances in Premier League, and it's just really interesting. And actually, my form tutor today, he asked me who you have on, and I said you, like, wow, because he's a Nottingham Forest fan. Because he's a
Wow.
Forest fan. I was like, no way you got him on, just crazy. So really good. So I say
my pleasure.
So let's crack on. So for you, what is a winner's mindset?
Oh, good question, Edward, to start with. I would say it's getting and wanting the best for yourself, not leaving any stone unturned with regards to what your goals are. Having goals specifically, I think you definitely need that to make sure that you achieve what you want to, either personally or privately. And I think the fundamental to it all is literally just giving all of yourself in that quest to do that, with obviously the respect for others that any form of kind of ambition should really have. So that's that sense of being able to do the best for yourself, which isn't to the denigration of anyone else, I think is absolutely imperative.
Yeah, you mentioned the stone on like all the goals and stuff, and is that something that you've had from a young age, like your dreams and stuff?
It's a funny one because I've got a son and a daughter. So my son's 10, my daughter's 13, and they both play sport. My daughter's very good at hockey and loves playing football. My son's very good at football. So you look at them, and they are competitive. They are they do give them a lot of themselves to these particular sports and the way they go about it. But I've not sat them down and said, you must win at all costs. You must do absolutely everything to make sure that that's the case, by any stretch of the imagination. So there is something, I think, possibly innately natural in that. Obviously, there's that debate about nature and nurture, but it was something, if you look at football, it was something I always wanted to do. There was never a question that I wasn't going to give everything in myself to be able to do that. And very fortunately, and like anything in life, Edward, you need luck on your side, you need timing, you need good situations, you need to take advantage of situations that you are presented or put inside of. And I was able to do that. And then once you kind of get a foot in the door of what it is to be a professional footballer, it's a fantastic job, wonderful career. And you do your utmost to stay in there because it is absolutely cutthroat and it's very, very competitive.
Yeah. Talk to me about your background then.
Okay, as in personally and school wise. Okay, I grew up in Hull. Went to a nice normal primary school. I then went to a secondary school, which was a private school, which I'm one of three kids. So my brother was older than me and he couldn't wait to leave school, went off into the Merchant Navy. My sister, slightly more academic than he was, but I loved school. I loved playing sports at school. I was okay at school. You know what I mean? I enjoyed being there, which I know is not necessarily the most straightforward thing for people to think about when they either go to school or remember school. But I loved every single minute of it. All the lessons, all the teachers, all the sport, loved the sport, and played rugby at this school, which probably brought out the aggressive side of the way that I went about playing football after that. so then at 16, I left to go and play for Nottingham Forest as a schoolboy. So you join as a 16-year-old after you've done your GCSEs in England, and then so I finished those in the May or the June, and then went straight playing football at the end of June, 1st of July, and then after that turned pro at 17, and after that it was just mainly a challenge and a race to get into the first team. So I played my first professional game for the first team at Nottingham Forest at 18.
Yep.
And I won't say I never look back, but once you're in there, it's that thing of keeping your place. Like any walk of life or any job that you're in, you get yourself with your feet under the table and you try and stick in there as much as you possibly can. And hand in hand with that, and what helps that, of course, is hard work and dedication.
What was your experience like at Nottingham Forest during the youth?
It was great, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. We had a good young team. We had other players such as Jermaine Jenis, who's gone on to work in broadcasting, also played for England, and as did Michael Dawson. Some really good young players with a really good manager who really tested us. I think so. What winner's mindset, you need good teachers, Edward, and you mentioned your teacher before we came on here. The fact that our tutor, sorry, and it being the best ones inspire you and the best ones push you on. And we had this fellow called Paul Hart, an ex-professional himself, who was at turns a taskmaster, but also a really paternal figure to a lot of us. So you knew we had our best interests at heart, even when you were getting pushed to the limit. And you only learn stuff about yourself, don't you, when you get pushed to the limit, and that stretches. And it is stress testing. I think professional football. Gary Neville talks about it a lot with regards to his youth team at Manchester United, where every day you were pushed, and that went into the first team. Every day you were pushed, so you know what you're capable of. And then once you're capable of that, you go again, and then that moves up, and it broadens you out as a human being and as a professional. But Nottingham Forest was nothing short of a pleasure. It was great. We had a really good team. We should have possibly done better promotion-wise. I don't think it's lost on any Forest fans that it's taken over 20 years for them to get back in the Premier League. Yeah. Tough times for them at the moment, but they seem to be enjoying it. It was great, and it was, like I said, nothing other than a total joy and a very special place to be.
What managers would you work really best with? Because you mentioned really teachers that really influence you and help you. And what managers would you work with? You know, and get on with.
You mean the type of managers, Edward?
Yeah, the type of managers and the type of leadership.
I think it's different, the different ages that you're at, because if you think about us as a group of 16 to 18-year-olds, that inherently comes with a territory that you think you know everything and that you can answer all the questions that get thrown up is wrong, because you need that confidence, you need that, not arrogance, that real, it's self-confidence more than anything, to be assertive and find your own little furrow to plow when it comes to playing football. And I think as I was younger, so we had Paul Hart there. David Platt was the manager that gave me my chance. He left, Paul took over. I then went down to Southampton with Gordon Strachan, similar to Paul Hart. Worked you very hard. Was a big fan of discipline, as you should be in any walk of life. Yeah, very much so, down at Southampton. And then we had it was a strange time at that club, because there was a lot of changing of managers, and you'd normally get 4 managers in 4 years. We had 4 managers in 1 calendar year, from what I remember. So, and then we had someone like Harry Redknapp, who's a little bit different and very much a character, very much a personality. And then as you get older, I think there's the element of self-policing, which then means that possibly that kind of disciplinarian manager, you kind of feel more your peers more than anything else. So I think it does change, Edward. So earlier on, I think it was more disciplinarians and people that put you in your place. As you get older and develop as a human being as a player, you should be able to police yourself. But you still need, obviously, those ones that are in charge. And I always liked the ones that I could have a good open dialogue with. Not saying that I've got everything to say to a manager, but I always try to say my bit, whether that was good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah. Do you have any regrets when you were like a young player, that you look back on now and go, I wish I did that differently?
I think regrets is a big word, isn't it? I had an incident when I was at Southampton where I managed to get myself banned for 10 games, which was pretty silly. And that probably was right in what turned out to probably be the middle of my career. So it kind of was going steadily like this. Then that kind of hit that and went slightly down. And then after that, I played at various places, ended up in League One. Still managed to squeeze 15 years out of it, which I'm very proud about. But given, obviously, when something like that happens, especially in football, you know what it's like. It's sensationalist. You mean, if you do a certain thing and act in a certain way, well, you set yourself up for that fall, to be honest. But there's possibly that, which was in a Premier League game back in 2005. But regrets wise, I don't know. Without sounding too kind of passive about the whole thing, I think you probably end up with a career that you deserve. There's plenty of lads that I was with in Nottingham as a schoolboy or as a scholar that didn't make it. They were better than me because either got injured, went off the rails, personal problems. So to say that you kind of got through what was a very kind of cutthroat industry to get to playing football, I've always been very proud of. So regrets, possibly not. Instances where you could have done better, absolutely, but I wouldn't necessarily class them as regrets.
Yeah. Talk to me about your time at Southampton then. In 2003, you joined them and you made loads of appearances with them.
I did. Well, yeah. It was great because, you know why? I got the chance to play in the Premier League, and now working as I do from a more media-based perspective, you realise just how big the Premier League is. Yes, I knew it at the time when you played there, but that gets beamed all over the planet. You know what I mean? You could be in the far reaches of wherever, and you could still watch Liverpool against Man U on a Sunday afternoon. It might not be on a Sunday afternoon, given the time difference. It could be anywhere. And presumably where you're based as well, it's huge there as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's huge.
But again, just goes to show the drawback. I was just happy that I got the chance to be able to do that, to be honest, Edward. And it was it was a dream come true because that's what you work towards. You work towards when you're playing with your mates, when you're a kid, you dream about scoring the winner in the FA Cup final or the World Cup final. You don't, with a great respect, dream about turning out for Scunthorpe, do you? But that's part of what it was. So I had 4 years there, 2 very good years, 2 not so good years, which were interrupted with discipline problems, I'd say, suspensions, and injuries. So I had a very good track record up till I was about 20, would it be 22, 23, I think, and then managed to break a metatarsal and rupture ankle ligaments. So that kind of derails any footballer's career when you can't actually run around. And by the time it ended at Southampton, I was ready to move on. I think they were ready for me to move on. So 4 years. It's a long time, isn't it? But it was in the blink of an eye, really.
Yeah, and after that, you returned to Nottingham Forest, and then you went to Leeds, and then obviously Swindon, and obviously Wednesday, and you kind of went on.
Yeah.
Was there a time in your life where you've had to see somebody about your mental health when you're playing football? Maybe during obviously that time that you said at Southampton, when you weren't playing as much. How much of an effect?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. Even more so now because I would think, looking back, to be fair, I had good mates, good people around me. My teammates were good. Manager at the time was good. When we were younger at Nottingham Forest, we had a sports psychologist called Keith Mincher who was really good. Yeah. Said a lot of very clear, concise things that helped you think about what you wanted from your career and from your life. But just there was no one, excuse me, that there was always somebody there for us to be able to chat to, whether it was you approaching them or them just kind of having a little check-in, just seeing how things were.
Yeah.
But I always hopefully managed to surround myself good parents to talk to. That was another one.
Yeah.
When I was very early on in my career, they always knew how much I wanted to be a footballer, and they kind of not left me to it but they knew my drive was there. And like I said, going back to whether you have that as a kid or whether that's put into you or whether you're born with it, it was there. And there was no bigger critic of me than myself. And on the flip side of it is, without sounding like an egomaniac, you know when you've done well, and you know when you've done something that you should be proud of. So in those instances, maybe looking back, and if it had happened now, so what's that, nearly 17, 18 years later, there'd have been an emphasis on let's check in and see how they are. But I had good people around me, so not necessarily from a professional sense were they approaching you.
Yeah.
The fitness coach Andy Spink there was great. He spent a lot of time with me, keeping me ticking over, keeping me fit. Good teammates all around that are not necessarily obvious, because there's a school of thought where you put a group of people, especially fellas, together in a team environment and you bond. That's not always the case. I've been in some very good dressing rooms. I've been in some terrible dressing rooms, to be honest, where nobody got on. So I was keen to make sure that I was okay getting through that. And the bottom line is that as well, in football, you have to be pretty robust. You know what I mean? If you play a football match, so if you're playing football, you know pretty quickly whether you've done good or bad, because you either get booed and sworn at, or you get cheered and clapped. It's a very straightforward line, right? And it's good in a way, because it's either good or bad. There's nothing really in the middle. So
social
you
media,
have to be pretty robust, and I'd like to think that helps you to get that situation. Sorry, mate, go on.
Because with players now like Harry Maguire, because he's getting abused a lot on social media now with his performances, and I do look at him at times and I do think, well, he must be finding that a bit hard, like with his mental health, because the amount of abuse that he gets, the amount of kind of laughs he gets, and I feel like he's only trying to do his best because what he gets could, like what he's like. Do you understand what I mean? Like he's only trying to do.
I think, yeah, because the thing that there's a bit of a discrepancy with football, Edward, because people say Harry Maguire cost, what was he, 70, 80 million quid? He cost more than Virgil van Dijk, most expensive defender on the planet.
Yeah.
So people go, well, there's a very, very straightforward and incorrect opinion that, well, he should be the best player on the pitch every time he plays, which is completely unreasonable.
Yeah.
We're talking about a human being. He's not a robot, is he? Is not an algorithm. He has to go on the pitch and perform. And if you're at Old Trafford, 75,000 people in that stadium, that there's a small portion that don't want you to do well. The rest, hopefully, on your side, want you to do well.
Yeah.
He's played for England in some of, absolutely right. It's such a good point you make, because it's not, some of it's gone beyond professional criticism, which is, as a footballer, you are absolutely open to.
Yeah.
You are, and you know that people buy into that. That's fine. You know that we don't like him because he doesn't do this as a defender. He did this in a game. He did that in a game. You should. It's not. Then it should not be personal attacks on physical appearance. I don't know, the way a player comes across, the personality of the player. We should be passing judgment on what they do on the pitch. And I think with social media, and it is slightly different in the sense of what you're asking me, what you call now back in the day, that you can't get away from it. I'm sure he can get on the internet and see how quickly, or what people think of him, and that can't be any good for your mental health at all.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a direct line to say, exactly. So now they're moving into this. Whoever's in the squad. I remember doing the Euros in Lille in 2016 when England lost to Iceland, wasn't it? And they had the big thunderclap and all this type of stuff. And even the players then are saying we could almost feel and hear what the comments would be on social media, what the headline would be the next day. That you talk about winner's mindset. That can't be the best way to perform and get the best out of people or players at all. So I think it must be. It's got to be part and parcel of a footballer's education and the staff around them. Someone to look after that. Someone give me the tools to be able to do it, because that'll never go away. As long as social media's there, that'll never go away. As long as the media's there, that criticism will never go away, because not everyone is unilaterally liked, are they?
Yeah, because with social media now, there's young players that are moving into the game, and they're having all this like publicity, and it can harm them. And I've seen a lot of examples of maybe young players with Dele Alli, when he kind of shot up, rising to the scene, and then he's had a few dips, and then he's obviously shot back down, and it's a real shame. And that's where I think managers, and with kind of creating a culture with a positive, because with a positive culture, I think it's hard to create that kind of amazing culture now in football. And I think managers play a huge role in that. And you see people like Howe at Newcastle, what he's doing there. And it shows how kind of What do you think, and what have you seen in your kind of professional career, where in examples where managers have really created like a really positive culture? And
Good question. And I think you're absolutely right. It's the manager that sets the culture in a team.
yeah,
And it's a sense of looking after each other. We had a good structure when I was at Leeds, when we went in and they were financially on a very unsound footing. And Dennis Wise was there with Gus Poyet, and they were brilliant. And he generated a kind of us against the world type mentality, which we loved. And it suited that bunch of players. Back at Forest when I was a kid, Paul Hart, it was us youngsters in it together. We were forging our way as a career together. That was a very positive environment, as was Gordon Strachan. So I think with Eddie Howe, he's done a terrific job. He's got the tools there. He's got the financial backing, and the Dele Alli kind of comparison is absolutely pertinent, because here's a young man, a young footballer, and they're talking about the way he dresses, what car he drives, the way he's done his hair, his attitude, and that is all coming from a certain kind of generational background of people passing judgment. But if you are a 50-something ex-footballer and you're looking at Dele Alli, you probably won't be able to understand him. And why should you? He's in his 20s. You know what I mean? It's like talking to kids. But that doesn't mean what he's doing is good, bad, or indifferent. It's just different. You know what I mean? And you need to embrace those differences. This kind of judgment, and don't get me wrong, Edward. These kids, I said these kids, these young people that are in this job in the Premier League. On the one hand, they're out there and they're being judged. They're also earning a lot of money nowadays. A lot, and there's always been a lot of money in Premier League football. But my word, it's astronomical what's coming. Exactly, and that's not. I'm not then saying that then you should be able to get over criticism, because I understand that that's incorrect, because we're talking about human beings. But that's what people see. So the person in the street who thinks that they're watching Dele Alli not try, they're going, well, hang on, he's on X amount, and if I had that chance, and that's always that leap between a supporter and a player. If the supporter had the chance to do that, then they might do it differently. A player is a de facto employee of a football club, so they might not love Spurs, they might not support Spurs, but they play for Spurs, and professionally they'll have the pride to be their best for Tottenham Hotspur, which then might lead to playing for England. So there is, you get the odd kind of bad egg that just kind of doesn't really care about what they do or who they offend, but they're very, very minimal. Most professional footballers I've come across, either playing against them, covering them, interviewing them, professional pride is absolutely at the very top of what their remit is, week in, week out, day in, day out, because they are so phenomenally judged across the board.
Yeah. So maybe young managers now, with McBeal at QPR, these kind of young managers, do you think they understand maybe the players more because they are a bit younger and a bit in their time? So do you think their man management would be better than maybe like a Steve Bruce?
So it's a really good question. I've worked with Steve, and I've also spoken to him a lot. I was just waving to my neighbour there as he walked past the window. And possibly having one foot in one generation and one foot in another, from my point of view, I can see how, because Steve, if you take a Steve Bruce as an example, he's the games that he's managed, the promotions that he's won, that's an effective manager. But you're absolutely right talking about Mick and Eddie Howe. Steven Gerrard's possibly another one, and he's in a little tricky situation now, isn't he? How he reacts to what's happened with him at Aston Villa. But generationally, it is different. These younger people are interested in different things. You know what I mean? We all live our lives through this, don't we? Like, you know what I mean? This little computer tells you everything and gives you answers and creates problems and helps and hinders and kind of innovates and inspires, but also really depresses you at times. So it's a part of it's a different world. So it's about, do you know what it is? If you come away from the actual issue of age, sorry, not the issue, the discussion of age, it's about being able to be relatable. And I think if you are of the mindset that you can put yourself in the shoes of a a younger person. But you talk about a younger person, you put 11 of these players on the pitch that keep you in your job every 2 days. So you need to be able to relate to them. You need to be able to make sure that they know what is, what's needed, what's wanted, and above all, professionally, that's the real operative word of professional football. It's your job. It's your vocation. You have to perform. You have to make sure that what the manager's asking you, you're doing.
You work in media.
I do.
Do you think football players respect you enough?
In what sense?
In what sense? I think with players now, I think they maybe see the media, see pundits, and go, "I'm not gonna listen to what they say because it doesn't matter." And it
depends what you're saying, how you say it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
If your job is to literally, like I said, I'm talking about a football job. If your job is as a pundit, for want of a better word, is to pass judgment, then you need to do your homework. You need to be respectful of who you're talking about. You need to, I think, have an opinion that's built on a solid foundation. I think what I always did, or what I always tend to do when we're covering football matches, I'll at least speak to, if not the managers of both sides, but at least a player or a contact or someone working in the media side of it. Because you can't steam in and say, "Oh, I can't believe he's done that," or "I can't believe they've done that," without knowing the context of it. Or, "I can't believe he's picked this team." Well, he might have picked this team because X, Y, and Z are injured. They're not having a good day. They're struggling. So I don't. Yeah, it's a funny one because you see sometimes these professional spats either on Twitter or someone's been called out on one of our shows or something like that, or whether it's BT, whether it's Sky Sports, whether it's beIN, whether it's, you know what I mean, all these platforms, but they're there to do a job, and footballers are there to do a job as well. And the fact that people are passing judgment, the fact there is a lot of financial clout about it, is because people genuinely love this game, don't they? Across the board, it's the biggest game on the planet, and it's been monetized as the biggest game on the planet. And part of you kind of thinks, well, if it wasn't as popular, it wouldn't be a job to do. It wouldn't be a way of people being very, very comfortable once they finish their career. So I think it comes with the territory, without being too blunt.
Yeah, because I watch Talk Sport, and I listen to maybe Simon Jordan. He has his kind of views on the way things are done.
It's good. Yeah, it's good.
Ness too. And I think half the stuff that he says, I go, yeah, totally good. And half the stuff I can, that's just ridiculous. I don't know why that's come out of your mouth. But I find it really, just really interesting because Souness, he's quite old school, and I think his views are very on what kind of characters that he played with, and it's kind of the same with Roy Keane. They kind of they think at that time. I think pundits, younger pundits like Mika Richards, and examples like that, and yourself, I think maybe.
Do you have a favourite, Edward, to put in? Do you have someone who stands out that you agree with?
I'd say probably Gary Neville for me.
Yeah.
Time. I just
good.
Because I think he actually speaks a lot of sense. But I think what I really like about him is he talks about lots of stuff. So we talk about like the politics and kinds of football, and he has all these views. And I think he's actually really interesting to listen to. And even like I just think people like that are just really interesting because they tell you their opinion, but it also comes from a respectful place, and I think that's really important.
I think as well, you've mentioned 4 or 5 names there which cover different bases. I think Simon, is a very, very intelligent fella, and he's got the experience of real world finance, building businesses, losing businesses, working at a football club, losing a football club. Graham Souness won majority of the things domestically that you would win, that you'd want to win. Phenomenal manager as well. Micah is a real bubbly character that understands telly, and I mean telly in like the broadest sense of it's entertainment. You turn tellies on to watch to be entertained, don't you? Roy Keane won everything that you could possibly want to wish for domestically as a footballer. And is of a different generation and has got a different dynamic. And Gary, I think, is another one that comes from a strict footballing background, but has branched out, as you say, into the world of business, the world of politics. I mean, the debate around him at the moment and others that are covering the football in Qatar is huge, isn't it? And he's I think he's been involved in some uncomfortable discussions and conversations, but he knows that doing and working where he is means that will be the case. So I've got respect for him for taking that on the chin. So I think across the board, because there is this separate entity which is football in the media and broadcast football journalism, then there is the element of it being, it's got to be entertaining, but it's also got to come from the point of view of good, solid experience, which all those people have got that you mentioned, and well prepped and opinionated. Because I mean, if you sat and watched football and everyone kind of just agreed, it'd be pretty dull. But fundamentally, what I always need to remind people of when we are covering football, when we are talking about it, the game's the most important thing.
Yeah.
People tune in to watch football. You don't have young kids dreaming of being a pundit. You have young kids dreaming of being a footballer. Sometimes punditry can come off the back of it if you get a leg to stand on with it, which is it's another wonderful profession.
Yeah.
But it's you can't take away from it, regardless of. So if we're watching over here, watching the World Cup, so the BBC will be covering it, ITV will be covering it, TalkSport, as you mentioned, will be covering it. The BBC on the radio will be covering it.
Yeah.
And if you're kind of getting into the games and watching the games, there may be the odd one where you kind of go, I'm not sure about them, I'll watch something else. But fundamentally, you're tuning in to watch the game. Fundamentally, you're tuning in to see whether England get past Iran or the USA or Wales. You're watching. That's why you're watching. And then everyone else can pass judgment before, during, and after. And you make of that what you will.
Yeah, I do agree. Sure. Now we're going to move into some quick fire questions. So here's the first one. Your favorite moment in football? Your favorite moment in football?
It was making my debut back in 1999, I think it was, Edward, and it was at Bristol City, and it was away down at Ashton Gate.
Who's the best player that you played with?
I was in an England under-21 team that was pretty good. So we had the likes of Jermaine Defoe, Peter Crouch, Joe Cole. I'll say Joe Cole because he was phenomenally talented.
Who's the best player that you played against?
Again, managed to be on the pitch at the same time as the Arsenal Invincibles. So it was toss up between Thierry Henry and Patrick Vieira. I'm going to go Thierry Henry, who was frighteningly good.
What was your pre-match meal?
It was mainly porridge, from what I remember.
Yeah, porridge.
Yeah, porridge.
Yeah.
Good slow release carb porridge.
Who is the top 5? No, let's say top 3 top championship managers right now. So
right now, that's a very good question. Vincent Kompany's pretty good. He's doing a decent job. Mick Beale, you mentioned, I've got a lot of time for, and let's say Paul Heckingbottom at Sheffield United.
Yeah, that's good ones. Your biggest role model.
I'd say when I was younger, it'll be my dad.
Cool. Messi or Ronaldo? I want to hear your thoughts.
This is a good. This is a great question because it's almost kind of poetry over prowess, isn't it? I would go. I understand Ronaldo. I played against him when he was a kid, and he was phenomenal back at when he was 17. But when you watch Lionel Messi play, it's just a joy to be able. So I'm going to go on the side of Messi for this. But then you ask me next week, mate, it might be completely different.
Exactly. It just always changes, doesn't it? This is the last one. Describe yourself in 3 words.
A lucky bugger.
Cheers for that. Yeah, that's really good there. We mentioned a lot of points. I expected this to go on for about 15 minutes, and it's went on for a bit longer than that. But that's what we did, because we've been really into the conversations.
And do you know the reason why it's gone on, Edward? Because it's the quality of the questions. That's when you, I presume, when you talk to people, you really think about it. You do your prep, and then, as ever, when you get a list of questions that you've got, it's then making it conversational, which I think is exactly what you've done. So kudos to you, mate, for being able to do that. It's very good.
Cheers. Thank you very much. And we're end off. Thank you.